Evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along to the Barbican Theatre and our webinar Masterclass series. It's lovely to see you all here. As you see, our participants are popping up on their faces, and they're all ready here to have a really great discussion about all the wonderful work they've been doing over the last year in lockdown. A couple of house notices. Firstly, we obviously are doing all this work for free, so if you're able to donate 50p to all the way to millions, if you have millions, that'd be wonderful. You can do that through the donation link that was just on your screen. You can do it on our website, and there'll be something put in the chat in a minute. If you've got any questions for our wonderful panelists, please send them through. Unfortunately, we can't share your face or your audio. However, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function where we'll be getting all of our questions, so throw them in there throughout any time, and we'll answer them as we go along. Apart from that, there's no more house rules. Enjoy yourself, relax, it's all good. And we've got all these wonderful people here to discuss this quite interesting review of the year so far and what it means for children's arts in the future. So we've got the wonderful Helen Bovey and Victoria Horan from Above Bounds Theatre Company. They're going to wave. Oh, lovely cue. We've got Gemma Smith from Take Apart. Wave, hey. We've got Jaqueline from Stiltskin Creative Company. Yeah, wave with that. That's great. And then finally, Hannah Harris, who's the CEO of Plymouth Culture. Where they're all going to do a one-by-one presentation of stuff, their companies and what they've done over lockdown. So to kick them off and to introduce themselves more, I'm going to hand over to Helen and Vicky.
Amazing. Thanks, James, for the lovely intro. And hi, everybody. So I'm Helen, and I'm the Artistic Director of Above Bounds Theatre. And joining me somewhere on your screens below or to the side is Vicky.
Hello everyone, I'm the lead artist on Above Bounds Theatre, and I'm part of, you may have seen me perform in multiple shows, and if you come along to any of our sessions, whether that's in person or online, I probably will have been leading them.
Fab, thanks Vicky. So I thought it would be great to bring lots of incredible people together for an evening like this to talk specifically about children's arts and children's arts in Plymouth. Quite often it gets put to the bottom of the pile when we talk about arts and culture, and for me it should be, you know, on an equal playing field with all the other fantastic arts and cultural activity that happens, and quite often it's just not discussed. So I'm delighted that we're having a conversation tonight about that, and that in its own right. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit more about who Above Bounds are, and what we've been up to in this last year, and how we've, as best as we can, weathered the storm. We're Above Bounds Theatre. We are based in Plymouth, and I set the company up about 7 years ago now, specifically with the aim of creating innovative work for families, children and young people, but creating that theatre work with them. And so the work that we make always involves children and young people from the start. Our kind of core principles are that we're very visual in our storytelling. Often that might be through kind of puppetry, it might be through big sets, it might be through kind of big colourful things, just very visual ways of telling stories. Always very imaginative. And that is because it doesn't really come from us. The ideas are kind of co-created with the children and young people and families that we work with. And they are wonderful and imaginative and playful and beautiful, and their ideas, together with ours, create the shows that we make. Everything we do is very live, and Vicky can probably talk a bit more about this actually, but quite often we have a kind of structure that holds a piece together, but what happens within that is kind of up for grabs depending on who's there watching the piece on that day. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Vicky, about the live element.
We're very responsive with all of the performances or the workshops that we run and make. And as Helen says, all the ideas and the inspiration for our work and what we explore and what we play with comes from the young people. So we have to be very in the moment and responsive, and always on alert for all exciting ideas that might be coming towards us from left, right and centre, which is super fun because it means that we can be playful all the time.
Yes, definitely. And playful is the next word. So Vicky almost knew there that was coming. And playful is definitely the biggest thing for us. Everyone should be able to play. But as we kind of grow up, that's something that we don't get a chance to do that in our day-to-day lives. And we like to encourage everybody, no matter their age, no matter their background, to just have some fun and have some play with us. And we like to create environments where the adults have as much play as the children and young people. Very responsive. whatever they would like, we try and work together to kind of create that, make that happen. And the children are at the centre of the work, so we don't create work for ourselves. You know, it's not for us and our kind of artistic ego. It really is about creating something where our ideas and children's ideas can come together. And so we call this co-creation, and this word is a bit of a hot word. It's something that I don't think I'd heard a couple of years ago, and seems to be something that lots of people talk about now. But it's definitely the way that we've always made work, believing that the young people are artists and makers too, being really authentic and honest with what we want to say and what they would like to say, making sure that when we're creating in a space, everyone is equal. So you'll never find us in a workshop sort of being above the young people. We really like to try and find an equal playing field. So making sure those roles, those typical kind of roles, can reverse at times. Making sure every voice and idea is heard, no matter how strange that might be. We're always transparent about our process. We let people know that if we're making a show with them, we let them know that that's what's happening, so that they don't suddenly feel like, hang on a second, this is my ideas in this piece of work. They know what they're letting themselves in for, and we like to be transparent with that. Inclusivity is also kind of key thing for us, so making sure that everyone can engage with the processes that we have. And our work is always inspired by young people's interests or voices or ideas. And this is the most important one, and I'm going to credit Nicole Redfern for this. She helped us coin this together. She's a wonderful director based in Plymouth as well. We treat the adult artists as curators and not dictators of a process. So we're there to kind of guide and shape rather than kind of dictate what that end result would be. And so one of our processes prior to 2020, where we kind of, it's a really good example of our process, is a tissue, which was a show that we made for 2 to 4 year olds with a group of 14 families in Southway Library in Plymouth. We worked with those families for a period of 5 weeks, and during each week we kind of worked on a different element of the show. So looking at location, story, characters, music, movement, and by the end of the 5th week we just pushed it all together and we had the outline and the framework for a show. We then took that and we spent some time in a rehearsal space together, and then we created a piece which we took back to them, and they kind of pulled it apart again, gave us some more feedback. We took it away one more time, and then we brought them back the final piece. And so it was a really kind of lovely process of working with a specific group to create something, which then went on to have a really huge life. So a tissue toured for at least 3 years all across the country. We quite often have a very strange partnership, but up in Scunthorpe we kind of went up there, performed in loads of libraries up there. We performed in London as well, in various places. It's performed in tiny libraries up on Dartmoor. So the scale of this show has kind of gone big to small to big to small for a couple of years, and I think it's because it really does have that child-centric kind of universal approach to working with 2 to 4 year olds. It really does kind of translate. And these lovely photos were taken by Jem, who's in the call, who speak to you in a little while. But you can see this is the first ever, this is when we brought the show back to them for the first time before we took it away again and worked on it some more. And something I'm not going to spend too long talking about, but we also, prior to 2020, ran the Above and Beyond Children's Theatre Festival with Plymouth Libraries in 2019 and 2018. And that was where we kind of programmed some children's theatre companies that we loved and brought them to Plymouth for the first time, and enabled the communities in Plymouth, Plympton and Southway to engage with that work for a really affordable cost, and to help us in shaping 3 days of a takeover of the library. So there was face painting, storytelling, music, crafts, tons of fun. And it was a huge success, something that like over 1,000 people came into the library spaces on the days, and 368 people watched the performances in meeting room spaces in 2019. A really lovely example of community space being used for a kind of theatrical activity. And we also took some street theatre into the High Street and Plympton as well. So, how did we translate this across to this last year where we've not been able to work with those families in the same way, where we've not been able to be in a space with them and making work in that same way? Essentially, we just tried a load of stuff, and that's why we wanted to bring people together tonight to talk about some of that stuff that we tried and to see if actually some of that might continue into the future. So, Vicky, are you able to just give a brief summary of the kind of last year and what we've tried?
I can do. So initially when lockdown was announced, myself and Helen really wanted to keep some form of engagement going on with the young peoples and families. And the only way we could do that was through digital performance. So we would log on to Facebook and YouTube live at 8 o'clock every evening to tell bedtime stories. And we did this for about 3 months and we had a great response. Loads of people locally in Plymouth and in Devon, but also people from afar tuned in. And off the back of that, we ended up starting some of our online sessions, which I've had the pleasure of leading. We've run an Up and Above Drama Club sessions, which are for 7 to 11-year-olds who were at home. And they could engage with every week and learn some drama and performance skills and building their confidence up with performance, trying something new and making new friends as well. And then we also run a Tall Tales for Tiny Tot sessions, which are for under fives and their families. And this is a great playful, open, creative session that ran every week as well for families to bond with their young people and also get to explore an adventure in their own homes and own spaces. So just like Helen has said, we're not alien to performing in loads of different venues, big and small. So it's been really interesting and really eye-opening to see what we can explore and perform and do in our very own homes. And it's been fantastic working online because we've managed to grow our audience and reach out to families and young people who live slightly further afield or who may not have engaged with our work beforehand or live in person, just because of various different factors such as where they're based or where they live, or whether they can travel down to the southwest. So it's definitely something that we'd like to share with other people and hopefully continue in the future too.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. And so something else, we've just recently started to create shows for Zoom as well. So a couple of weeks ago, we created the Igloo Experience, which was a piece that we'd co-created with some children and young people through the With Flying Colours project in Plymouth. And then we made a show for tiny ones, so under fives again, but specifically on Zoom. And that was wonderful and strange, kind of Vicky performing in her own home, but with a huge kind of theatrical setup behind her and us trying to figure out how that translates to an online medium. And that's really what kind of concludes our little presentation to start with. I was very fortunate to be awarded some money through the Plymouth Culture Recovery Fund to investigate and look at the link between sort of digital performance and live performance and start to think about what we do as we come out of this. And so alongside those activities, we've been conducting some research since last sort of October time with families, asking families if they'd like to see stuff live again, if that live stuff would like to be on their streets or in the park or popping up outside their window, or if they'd like to engage digitally. And I think it's been really interesting to hear the responses throughout this time period and to trial a few different things like the Igloo Experience, trialing some pop-up puppets in Teats Hill and kind of lots of other areas of the city in October. And now we're at that point where everything's starting to wake up again and things are starting to happen in person again. And so I'll be interested to discuss in a little while about what we think will happen and if people will actually still engage with digital or if that's not an option anymore from now on.
Thank you very much, guys. That was really interesting. And as Helen said, these guys will be back later to join the big discussion as we were. But I'm going to quickly segue, because I've got so many questions, but I'm going to have to stall them. So I won't get into that. To the wonderful Gemma Smith, whose photography was just featured then as well, which is amazing, who's from Take Apart. And she's going to talk through all the wonderful work they've been doing over the past year as well.
Thanks, James. Yeah, it's nice when something happens with your other hat on. It's a bit strange, isn't it? So yeah, I'm here with my Take Apart hat on today. It's interesting because I kind of feel like the odd fish in this scenario, because Take Apart aren't experts in delivering sort of work for young people, but we do work with children as a kind of route into delivering with families and then into community. So I thought it'd be interesting to reflect on that. And also, I'm going to kind of flip it. I know we're talking about screens, but we've had a really interesting journey with how screens are used during lockdown, and we kind of started from a place of not working with screens at all, and then moving towards screens to help us with creative delivery. So I'll talk a bit about that. So some people won't have heard of Take Apart, so I've just put this little description on the first page. So this kind of sums us up in a sentence. We work with communities to celebrate, connect and learn together, to amplify places and erase social inequality. It sounds very grand. Basically, we make art with people in their community with an ambition to improve a space or develop skills or change something about where people live. So we work with what is strong with community and not what is wrong with a community. And as I said before, we don't specifically work with young people, but my role as creative education director means that we link a lot with schools in those communities that we work in, and we use that relationship with the schools that we work in to then connect them with the community and build projects with young people and their families that way. So I guess that's our link. So when the lockdown first happened, people came to us quite quickly because we do a lot of on the ground work, and they wanted to know how we could continue to engage with people. So one of the first things that we created was this non-digital isolation engagement open source doc. This is just a screen grab from the doc, but the address is along the top there, so if people want to go and check it out, they can. It's live, it can be added to at all times, but these were just things that you could try and do to continue to connect with people. We found that the communities we work with aren't strong on digital engagement. So for us, it was finding those ways to keep connected and keep letting them know that we were there and being creative despite the lockdown, because we were in the middle of quite a few projects when it happened, as many people were. And this is an example of one of the projects that we tried. So we were partway through a project looking at the history of Coxside and mapping spaces in Coxside linked to trade. So this is a map that our artists came up with that was sent home in packs to families in Coxside and through the children of frontline workers that were in the local school, with the idea that people would fill it in based on like daily walks. So I've got a couple here. It worked quite well. We weren't sure what the uptake would be like, but people were quite interested in filling in their daily walks. So the first one that I showed you there is a bit more kind of a historical kind of remembering of places in the community. And then this one's more what they saw on their daily walk, like seagull at a crab hole. I like that one a lot. So this was a really interesting project, but because what we found, it was great non-digitally because people could engage with it and do it in their own home really easily. We have a lot of digital poverty in the places we work. So that was one reason why screens didn't feel like a very good option initially. But we did find with this project, there was a real feedback loop gap in that people filled them in really nicely, but we couldn't always get them all back or know how many people were doing it because we didn't have a platform for that. So that was a real learning curve around how we should try and kind of push that digital interaction and try and encourage that more or support that more if we could. We're also very small, so in terms of being able to support people to engage digitally by offering devices, that was a lot harder for us. Then we worked with Plymouth Scrap Store, and they're brilliant. If you haven't worked with them, check them out because they're fantastic. And we made these art packs that went home to families to try. So this was still non-digital, still no real other engagement other than a pack being passed out. We used the schools as a base for it, and they went out at the same time as food packs, and they were just for people to get creative at home. There was no specific task, but we were aware that lots of families might not have the time or resources at home to do things or make things. So this was something that we tried, and they were really well received. Again, though, we didn't really, this is the thing that was lacking with the inability to link digitally, was we didn't really have a lot of evidence of how people use them or a way to interact with them. This was another little project we did that's not specifically aimed at young people, but we did work with some of the frontline children in the local school. So I thought it'd be just interesting to share. We produced Coxside Echoes. This is Katie, who is a Coxside community member, and she's the editor. And we got people in the community to write about their lockdown experiences and then collated that into a publication that was funded through the National Lottery, through their COVID fund. So this was just a really nice way for people to share their experiences, and then these were delivered out to people. So everyone felt connected even though they weren't connected. Still non-digitally, although for this we did do a Zoom workshop with a writer called Alan, who offered up some kind of tips and tricks for writing, and that we had some take up with that. Again, we still found people were really hesitant to connect on screens at that point in that particular community, so that was quite interesting for us. Then we did another set of art packs. So this is skipping on a bit in lockdown now. I'm trying to kind of condense it down because I'm aware I don't have loads of time to talk to you. But we did a second wave of packs right before we unlocked for the second or third time. How many times have we locked and unlocked now? So the school had a link with an African school, and they wanted to do some recycled art. And this time we worked with our in-house artist, Soraya Phillips, who's based at Highview School. So this was a project with Highview School. And we asked the scrap store if they could create us a pack that would kind of work with materials that we could use for making recycled flowers and plants and things like that. Soraya actually researched the packs with the scrap store and then made these videos. So this was the first time we kind of delved into the video world, but she made these videos. This is a little snippet of one.
Hi everyone, this is a little video to show you how to make plastic flowers out of plastic bags. We're going to be using the resources that you were sent in your art packs. So these are the things you're going to need. Some plastic straws, some pipe cleaners, some bottle tops, masking tape and scissors, and also some plastic bags.
So that's just the introduction. Obviously, she goes on to explain the activity in lots more detail. But this was the first time we thought about actually sending home a video. I mean, school had been doing it anyway with their learning. And we thought, you know, this might help to engage people further in making with the activity. So we sent home a bespoke video as well. And it was really well received. So we were kind of beginning to learn how we could use screens and non-digital stuff kind of together for the first time, really. That's me. We had to make the packs. So that's me putting together, how many were there? About 120 packs in the PE cupboard at school. I don't know why I put that picture in. There we are. And then the use of screen, this is the last little bit I wanted to share really. So we've had a project, Highview School had an Arts Council funded project called Centre of Excellence in Creative Education, which Take a Part have supported in developing. And we held back on going into school for a long time because we couldn't. And then we decided that we worked with the Educare children at school to deliver our first artist project, which was going to be shadowed by 2 partner schools in Plymouth. And Soraya, very similar to the African one you've just seen, prepared a film that could be shown to support families to do some of the activity at home, and school supported by providing some of the resources. So I think, yeah, I'll just show you a little bit of this video and then I'll explain what happened.
Right, I'm going to show you how to edge the piece of card that you've been given, or the shape of the figure. It's obviously a 2D piece that we're going to make into a 3D form. You have the template, a strip of card like this, glue and some masking tape. And the first thing you need to do is cut off strips of masking tape like that, attach them to the side of your arm or to the side of your table. You need at least 30 pieces, but maybe start with 10.
So again, that's just the beginning of that video, but it gives you a flavour. So we felt that we would be sending those home and that children that couldn't be in school would be doing them. And then the rules changed and schools reopened. And we sort of went, we can go into school now and we can deliver, brilliant. And Soraya actually decided that what she would do is use these videos as part of our in-school teaching. So we taught to each class, there's 3 classes in this particular year group, so 90 children. We worked with each bubble each week, so we had 2 sessions with each class, but we used these videos as a teaching tool because it meant we weren't having children crowding around looking at an activity kind of over each other's heads. It meant that we could rewatch the videos to look again at what the learning was. It meant that Soraya could observe the children watching and see if they were paying attention. So for lots of reasons, the videos and the use of screen, even though we weren't using it to connect with people at home, became really, really important for this project. I just wanted to share this little quote. I could read it really quickly. So I think the learning that Soraya had on this project was really interesting for me. So she said that, I won't read it all, I'll paraphrase, despite her initial anxiety, she was surprised at how effective the videos actually were in supporting the delivery of the project. And it just goes on to one more, where she says she's now converted despite her initial scepticism about remote learning for children and the use of videos for teaching. She's definitely going to use them now in the future. And I think for her as an artist and then us as Take a Part, to see that kind of evolution from being like, we're non-digital because that was how we needed to support our communities, and that was what we listened to initially with that delivery, to move on to finding ways that use of video and use of screen work for us for engaging young people. I think that was really interesting. So that was kind of what I wanted to share with you guys. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Hopefully that will make sense.
That was great. Thank you so much. It's so interesting to see even the difference between what you and obviously Above Bound and all the amazing work that you've done over the past year. all things considered. Everything's yeah, it's amazing to see. And again, so many questions. I've been writing them down. You guys are going to be inundated. It's going to be quite intense after we got through everyone. I think next is Jaqueline Slade from Stiltskin. There you are, Jaqueline. Lovely to see you.
Hello.
So again, the Jaqueline Slade from Stiltskin, who's going to talk about what she's done this year and the wonderful
Indeed.
work they have done.
So I'm Jaqueline. I'm the artistic director of Stiltskin's theatre company, and I also am the co-founder and run the Soapbox Children's Theatre that's based in Devonport Park. So this is the Soapbox Children's Theatre. Stiltskin have been running for 21 years. We've been based in Plymouth for that time. We used to be a nationwide company touring around doing lots of street theatre and working in schools. And then we started to home our work into working in schools in Plymouth. We create a lot of theatre for children that we used to tour around schools, a lot of huge parades where we made giant puppets with children, and we would have 400 children in a parade walking through the town. It's very exciting. And then in 2014, we came across this building in Devonport Park. The building was initially built in 1941 as a mustard gas decontamination unit. We took it over and had a vision to create a very small and intimate but very lovely space for children to be able to come and experience theatre all year round. We got funding. We managed to sort of create this lovely facade of the building, and since 2015 we've been open to the public, creating up to 9 shows a year for children as young as 6 months old, right the way through to doing our Discover Shakespeare programme and all sorts of things like that. So we do lots and lots of very exciting things, and we also use the grounds around the theatre for festivals and things like that. So in 2020, on March the 17th, the worst thing about having a theatre and a building is that due to the government announcing that all theatres had to close, we actually had to close our doors. And we thought to ourselves, it can't stop us. We can't stop doing what we need to do. We need to get the work out there so that communities can still engage in the arts, in theatre, in storytelling. And so we launched 2 days later the Soapbox TV, and we launched that with our online stories. So you can see I'm in most of these pictures here. It's because Ian, my partner in crime, was mainly behind the camera, making sure that everything was being filmed. So we filmed stories in the theatre, and we filmed a story each week, and that went out. And what we discovered actually was that these stories were being seen by people not just from Plymouth. So we were starting to become quite a nationwide company as well, which was really very exciting. And then we also created workshops and storytelling, interactive storytelling for preschool children and primary school children. And you can see these pictures of me in our front room with a green screen behind me. I've got all sorts of things going on behind me, making puppets, and children were coming up with what happened next in the story, and we were going on all these amazing adventures. So it was all very, very exciting. Stiltskin are also engaged in the With Flying Colours project, so we were making videos for helping people to make puppets and all sorts of things like that. At one point I was actually telling a story to a group of children. It was someone's birthday party. They'd booked me to tell a story, and there were children coming online, rubbing their eyes, and they were all the way from Canada. So we'd suddenly gone international with our online presence, which was very fun and exciting. At the same time, I launched a book. I've been illustrating and writing a book that was linked to one of our plays called Dinosaur. So this is just me a very proud moment holding the book that had been printed, and just the picture of the dinosaur that was from our show that I've been making a puppet. But because we are based in the park, we didn't really want to let that go. And one of the things that we were really aware of was that children needed to also get outside and keep being outside and keep playing. And so we worked with the council and the park gardeners, and we cut this big labyrinth into the grounds around the theatre. And that was just so lovely to be able to sort of watch from a distance and see children and families walking the labyrinth and just playing in the park. So that was just lovely to start to use the land around the theatre in a very different way as well. And then in July, we discovered that we could actually do outdoor theatre. So we licensed the grounds all around the theatre. And I think that what we were so lucky was that we are based in the park. So we were able to license the grounds. And then we created this little teepee village. We created this village every day for a show that we were going to launch, which was called Troublesome Tykes. So we had a team that came in every morning. They built the teepee village. We put up the set, and people started to come to see live theatre. And you could just tell the joy of people being able to get out of their homes. They were sat in their COVID-safe pod, their teepee, and it was just so wonderful to be able to offer live theatre again. And there we go, a family sat in their teepee. And this is Troublesome Tykes. This is Ian as one of the characters. But what we also did was we got some funding from the Arts Council to work with Photo Now. And Photo Now filmed this show. We got funding for them to film 3 of our shows. So they filmed Troublesome Tykes, our Christmas show, and they're going to film one again this year. And so we've got those films for those people that are shielding, so that they were able to watch the show as well as it going on live. So we started to actually think about how we could use our online presence, even though we were live in the park. We knew that there were people that wouldn't be able to come and see us, and we still wanted them to still engage in the creative activity and in culture. And what was also great about being out in the park was that we had a platform where we could invite touring companies to come and perform as well. A lot of touring companies found that they just weren't able to have anywhere to perform. They usually performed in theatres, so we were able to offer them a space. And with our COVID safe audiences, it all went really, really well, and we were able to open a programme for last summer. What I didn't say was that we have got planning permission to build an amphitheatre outside the soapbox. So this is kind of launched our amphitheatre, so it's actually really very exciting. And then in July, we were actually able to also bring our workshops. So we do a lot of after-school workshops. I didn't say that we'd taken all of our after-school workshops online. So that's children from the age of 4 right the way through to 16-year-olds. We were doing online stories with our after-school workshops. They were creating plays. And with our Phoenix Youth Theatre, they actually wrote a script whilst they were doing their online workshops. So they had their sessions were about script making, really. So that was a very different way of working, and I think they really enjoyed that because it was a chance for them to see how a script was put together. And we usually always devise scripts with our young people anyway, but it was just their chance to get to the nitty gritty of how they put it together. As you can see, social distancing with our hoops out in the park. So this was last summer. And because we were using the outside, we then started to think about how we could work and create our Christmas show outside. And we got Arts Council project funding to work with 3 fantastic actor musicians, and created a promenade performance called Quest for the Ice Dragon. We also, within that funding bid, we managed to work with Blind Summit Puppet Company, who came and helped us to build our wonderful big ice dragon, came to help us with all the mechanisms for that and everything. So this is just a tryout. The ice dragon isn't quite finished there, but these are our actor musicians trying it out for the first time. So that was very exciting. And we ran that show right the way up to Christmas. We did 15 shows, I think that was right. We were meant to do 11 more in January, and then the next lockdown came. So, just to sort of say, we also work with Media Workshop to create an animation to go on our wall. So I suppose what I'm saying is that we started to really explore how we could use the outside. This is just them setting up the projectors. I don't have a photograph of the animation, but it was fantastic. And we had a fantastic young team who came in every morning and built our auditorium with all these gazebos, come rain or shine. They were out there putting up the gazebos, getting out all of the chairs, just making it all ready and COVID safe for our audience to visit. So, I'll just very quickly talk about what we've done since this lockdown. So we had to go back online with all of our workshops again. So we went back online, and all of the children have created a film. So we wrote scripts that they could then perform, and I've been recording their performances, and we're going to pull all of the recordings together so that they actually have a film. It's a film that it links with some of the work that they did whilst they were at the theatre as well, and it just sort of like, it's a kind of celebration of everything that they've done over the past year, how brilliant they've been with their online work, how the work that when they did manage to come back for a short space of time, how that has linked into the work that they've done now. So I'm very excited about all their films that we'll be able to put together, and then they'll have that as a record of what they've done over this past year, which is fantastic. Just to say, with our outdoor space, that we were given funding from Green Minds and Power to Change to develop the little garden at the back into a storytelling community art garden. And it's so that we can put on shows and theatre and storytelling all year round, but it's also a space where the community can come in. A lot of people don't have gardens, so although they've got that great big park, it's also the chance to just come in and learn through the arts and just do a bit of creative play and things like that. So, and just rewild themselves. We've planted a 40-metre living willow fedge. We've planted trees. There's going to be a sleeping giant in there, a storytelling chair, birdhouses, and much more. So that's our future, I think, of the theatre, that actually a lot of our stuff is just going to continue to be outside. So there we go. That's the end of that.
Wonderful. That's so interesting, especially I'll have to talk about planting.
Sorry.
No problem. No, it's fine. It's fine. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so now we're going to hear from Hannah Harris, who is the CEO of Plymouth Culture, and about what they've been doing to help organisations in this time. Hand over to you, Hannah.
Great, thank you. And if anyone's the imposter in this conversation, it's definitely me, because we have not been doing all these amazing things that these individuals and organisations have talked about today. So we at Plymouth Culture, we are a sector support organisation. So our role is to look kind of citywide at how we support individual artists and arts and cultural organisations to be able to do amazing things across the city. And of course, COVID hit very quickly, and all of us, we had to really start to think about what that meant for the future of our city and for our cultural sector. So we haven't been delivering all these amazing things, but what we have done is written a 10-year culture plan during the pandemic, and it's really given us an opportunity to reflect. I think lots of what's been said today is that time to just think, actually we have to completely rethink how we work, what people need, what is important and what isn't, and then how we reshape and reframe ourselves. And many of the organisations have had to kind of reinvent themselves along the way. So we saw that as an opportunity to stop and reflect on what we want to be as a city and what the important things are to put in place so that we actually do lead ourselves to a different and better future. So although we've been managing the process of developing the plan, it has involved literally hundreds of individuals and organisations across the city, from arts and culture, but also from business and health and education and local authority, transport, sport. So it's been a really collective effort to look at what we could and should be as a cultural city. And what that enabled us to do over that time was to really understand the value of culture in our city. We've had these amazing examples today, and that's just from 3 organisations. So when you scale that up and you look at everyone that's involved in delivering culture or providing opportunities, we have this huge array of jobs and investment, but also opportunities for young people. So even just across a small selection of our organisations, there are kind of 95 different opportunities for young people to engage in activities across the city every week, and that might be from theatre to music to dance to arts and visual arts. So it's a whole spectrum. We know that there are workshops and performances that people can engage in, and we did a survey when COVID sort of first hit, so around May of last year, and asked our cultural organisations, if nothing changes, so if we remain in lockdown or we remain in a kind of tiered state, what would the impact be for audiences? And in just that 1 year period of closure, there was an estimate just from those organisations that completed the survey, was around 100, that we would lose an audience of over 1 million people, and 94% of those were from Plymouth. So that sort of shows the extent of the reach of what culture does in the city. And I think we forget, because we all participate in little ways, and it might be going to a music concert, or it might be going to something in the park, or it might be going to something at the library that we've seen today. But those are audiences, and those are people that during COVID would have had all of that taken away from them if it weren't for the amazing adaptability and responsiveness of the organisations and artists that we've seen examples of today. So it kind of really gave us an opportunity to highlight the importance of arts and culture to our city, not just in financial terms, but in terms of access and engagement for our audiences as well. And so throughout this sort of 9 to 10 month process of developing the strategy, we finally arrived at a vision, which is not an easy thing to do when you've invited 100 people to give their opinion and their suggestions. So we hope that it reflects what we want to be by 2030 as a cultural city. And we've used the term magnet city because we really want, and I think this is really true of people and organisations in Plymouth, is we don't just want people to be bystanders. We don't want people to look from afar and say, that looks good, that looks interesting. We want them to be physically drawn to us, compelled to come and engage with us. And that's whether they are visitors or whether they are seeing family, whether they are studying here, whether they are businesses looking to invest, a whole spectrum. But we want them to engage with us. We want them to feel part of what we have here and to contribute to making what it could be. And for us to do that, we've really placed emphasis on people and planet. We see the future around culture not divorced from the question of our environment and our landscapes, both natural and built. And there's been some incredible examples of that given tonight, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And for us to be able to do that, for people to be able to and engage in what Plymouth has, and for it to really feel unique to Plymouth, it's got to reflect our communities. And we mean that in terms of geographical communities, as well as historical, the sort of heritage we have, as well as communities of interest. And so we mean that in the whole sense of we need to make sure our culture reflects, engages, involves our diverse communities, for it to feel Plymouth, but also for it to be of the highest possible quality. So after we sort of looked at the strategy, we then looked at 5 ambition statements. So by 2030, what do we really want to have achieved or be able to say about our city in a cultural sense? So the first one, I won't read these, but I'll talk through them, is really about how our culture reflects, and we've described it here, our blue, grey, green landscapes, both built and natural. So the blue in terms of our waterfront city, the grey in terms of our urban architecture, whether you love it or hate it, it is unique, and our green landscapes. So we've heard from Jaqueline about the use of the green space and how important that is, and that isn't just a knee-jerk reaction to COVID. That's actually something that gives us a really interesting long-term kind of unique selling point for Plymouth, that who has extensive, we have, as a city, have extensive waterfront, we have extensive green spaces as well. And what we're trying to do with that is not just to put stuff in those places, but for those places to inspire the art and culture that we create as well, so that they're absolutely memorable experiences and can only happen here. This is about theatre that can only happen in Devonport because of where it is, and because of the sources of influence that it involves, and because of the communities it involves, for example. This is a really short one, but it's so critical in terms of what we're trying to say about our city and do, is that we want to make cultural encounters part of the everyday for everyone. So the fact that you would come across something in a park, or you would have an experience when you pop to the library, and those are just examples we've heard today. We just want these things to be part of people's everyday, and that it is an entitlement and not a privilege of whether you are able to access amazing art and culture. We've got a great picture here from the Barbican of some of their amazing puppet shows that they did through the streets of Plymouth, and things like that are just an amazing experience for people, and are possibly that gateway into thinking about joining something or engaging in something further. So we want that to just become the norm within the city. This one is key, and Helen talked about this at the start, around co-creation. So we have some, and all the organisations on this call today are perfect examples of this, and exemplary examples of co-creation. And actually what we see is we have really amazing best practice across the city in pockets of organisations and locations. But what we want to do is make this part of Plymouth's DNA. So we want it to be able to be said by others that the approach of Plymouth is co-creation. In everything we do, there is an element of co-creation that drives how we do things, what the outcome looks like, how we have to navigate that discussion and negotiation often, so that we don't just, again, have passive audiences, but they're part of making and shaping our cultural offer. And then this one's quite specific. It's one of the few statements that we've made that's about a kind of subsector, which is about immersive cultural experiences. So there is an element of technology within that, but we're more interested in the experiences, and how, as a city, using our outdoor space, using our alternative buildings and settings, as well as our kind of digital expertise that sits within the city, how do we start to bring those together so that, again, we have like utterly memorable and immersive experiences within the city. We've got a picture here of Illuminate, which is probably one of the first examples that comes to mind for people, but we saw Jaqueline there starting to use digital technology, animation, video mapping. Helen, you've done things with the giant puppets that are an immersive experience, even though they might not be digital. And others where digital technology is starting to feed into things like giant puppets. So you're kind of getting that hybrid where there's a digital experience, possibly screen-based, but possibly in person as well. And you sort of get these worlds coming together to create this immersive experience. And then that final one was about equality and understanding the importance and the absolute imperative of having diversity of voice and building an inclusive cultural sector where everyone's creativity is valued, has a place, has an opportunity to platform, And I think through COVID, that started to reflect where, you know, everyone can draw a rainbow and has been doing so, whether that's digitally, whether that's on their windows, whether that's from their 5-year-old or in care homes, or people are going into their gardens, people are baking. This kind of inner creativity that people reach to when there is crisis is something that we just don't want to peak when there's crisis. We actually want to start to build into people's lives and to create an opportunity for people to express their inner creativity in any way they choose to, and for them to feel that that is of equal importance and value to any institution this city might have to offer. And so those are our kind of ambition statements. I hope you can see there is a connection to what's been discussed today, and to really make the point that these, although we're looking to 2030, they're absolutely rooted and based on what we already have in this city and what is already great. And it's more about amplifying those things and understanding, as a city and as leaders and as people with money and resource and funders, how do we enable existing creative artists, practitioners and organisations to do more of those amazing things, rather than us just thinking about what's the next new shiny thing. It's about amplifying what we already have, making it more visible, making it more accessible. One of the things we've talked a lot about is quality, and Helen alluded to it, that I think especially when there's anything for young people or families, there's almost an assumption that it won't be professional because it's for 5-year-olds, and what would they know? And we know, like, I have a 2.5-year-old, he's like the biggest critic going. If it's not top notch, they will tell you. And they deserve professional quality, high quality, engaging, immersive experiences. And so we need to move our city and our thinking on a little bit to make sure that the family programme isn't an add-on, and it isn't something that kind of happens over there because it's not really professional, it's just a nice to have, but actually is a core part of the audience we want to engage, our creative leaders of the future, and that we make sure when we're thinking about digital and screen and physical, when we start to emerge from this COVID lockdown, how, again, we don't make assumptions about one being better or higher quality than the other, that somehow if it's gone online, it's kind of just, you know, because someone's doing it in their bedroom or because someone isn't in a professional theatre, that it's somehow lower quality. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we're entering a new world where we have to almost redefine those parameters. But we've suggested within the culture strategy that we work with something like the quality metrics that the Arts Council put together, actually back in 2015 now. So there's a starting point, but there's work to be done, and they kind of list things, and I've given them here, that how we would measure quality, not in terms of scale or how big a budget it's got or how many professional actors are involved in it or not, but actually quality comes in terms of statements like the concept. Is it the most interesting thing you've seen? The presentation, was it really well presented and performed? Distinctiveness, was there something really different about this in terms of the way it was done, or what you were experiencing? Was it thought-provoking, so actually it leads you to think or engage in a different way? Captivating, all the examples we've been given today, absolutely. Enthusiasm, like, would someone want to see this again? That's the mark of quality. If someone wants to do engage again. Was that kind of local impact, that it's really important that it happens, that there is some local relevance? And Jaqueline again talked about the fact that in that locality not everyone has a garden, so actually the importance of placing something in a green space is much more significant in this locality than maybe other places it would be. Is it original? Is there some groundbreaking elements in that? Are we taking risks? So actually, are we trialing things in different ways? And you know, the online is an example of that, but there are so many other examples of where new things are happening in this place. And excellent. So is it the best example of this type of work that you've seen? So it is not necessarily saying that someone who has a suitcase performance on a village green should be compared to the National Theatre. It's actually saying, is it the best example of that you've seen? So outdoor art, street art, children's performance, family performance, and sort of making sure that it has a mark of quality within that setting and within that categorisation. So there's work to do here, but I think what I've tried to give you tonight is an overview of how we're thinking as a city around our cultural sector, the amazing things we already have here, and how we hope that will drive the next 10 years of activity for Plymouth.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really detailed and really interesting, and it adds really well. And I think really if we welcome everyone back, hey, and everyone unmutes, we're all back. Woo! Just before I go into asking these guys questions, if you wonderful people attending have got any questions for these wonderful diverse range of experiences through lockdown and what's going on, please throw them in the Q&A function and we will get round to them. That would be amazing. I'm going to ask this one. This is a group one, but I think we'll start with Helen and Vicky. Hannah touched on that just a second ago, and obviously we've seen through what the work you've done, the engagement from like Canada, from local, for like Jaqueline's work and your work, how important children's arts have been for families, for people in lockdown to get through this. So why do you think that it is still seen as the thing is you start in children's theatre or children's TV, and then you sort of progress into proper work, as Mr. Tumble was once said. He was doing a panto and someone went, would you like to do some proper work soon? And you're like, but why do you think that is still seen as that?
It's a really good question, and I think it spreads all across the arts and culture industry, to be honest. I think there's a real lack of development opportunities for people that specialise in children's theatre and children's arts. I've found that quite often I've applied for artist development schemes and have not got a place, and they've said, oh, well, we don't do that sort of work, I'm afraid, that's not what this is for. Or, you know, I will have gone along to something and kind of been a bit dismissed and not necessarily my work not necessarily talked about, or kind of even kind of brought into conversation because they go, oh, well, Helen just does that lovely little thing over there. And I once had an instance where somebody saw my work and said, oh, that was so brilliant, they had such a good time, but it probably only took you a day to put together. And I just crumbled inside, and that was someone really like, you know, industry that's really kind of probably never made a show for children before, but really well acclaimed. And I think it's an interesting one, that this is something that we internally deal with like when we're in the same industry as other people, it's something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and I don't know, Vicky, if you wanted to answer to that at all.
Yeah, just like as Hannah was kind of touched upon, like the importance that children's theatre or theatre for young audiences and families bring to the development of a young person, or the development of a bonding relationship between your friends and family, guardians, people who look after young people. Because at the end of the day, young people and children are future generations to come, and the experiences that we can like support, expose them to and immerse them with will really build their character and really start to shift the way in which people may start to see art in the future. And like Helen says, if anybody makes a comment about not programming children's work because not many people will attend, there's not much need for it, or the undervalue of how long it takes to produce or create a children's show, whether that's creatively, whether that's logistically putting funding together to produce it, it's very undermining. But I just think back to all the wonderful rehearsals that like I've ever had making children's work and think, I put my blood, sweat and tears into that, how dare you. But it is, on a serious note, it's really valuable. And the joy it brings as well. It's not just for young people, it's not just for your don't just think, oh, because I've got a 6-month-old, they're not going to engage because they haven't developed yet. It's all part of the development process, and it brings such joy to families as well to experience that with their young person.
Yeah, and definitely like we live in a world where adults can't play or can't be seen to play, and the space of just encouraging an adult and a child to play together, like we demonstrate that behavior, and then we hope that continues, because we're taught that we can't do that, and so many people have never done that before they kind of engage in an arts workshop or a theatre workshop, and it's just like, it's such valuable skills.
I think it was interesting because obviously, Jaqueline, you've been doing this, been touring nationally, and then obviously set the theatre in the park itself. How have you found that kind of development of even approaching funders for getting to a dedicated young person's theatre? How was that? Was that a bit of a battle in that sense?
I think, one thing that really launched the Soapbox Theatre was a crowdfunding campaign. And we kind of put out our vision and showed the photographs of this rather manky building and said, we have a vision to make this into a children's theatre. And the families with children really recognised that vision and supported the crowdfunding campaign. And so therefore then we were kind of launched. So, and we at Stiltskin, we'd been working in schools for a very long time, so we weren't public facing. So, you know, that people knew of us because we'd worked with their children in schools. But we were suddenly talking to a very new audience, and it just showed how people wanted it to happen and the need for it to happen. And there is a quote, apologies, I don't know who said it, but somebody actually said, for a really thriving creative community, you need a children's theatre, or you need children's theatre. You don't even need the theatre. Children's theatre has to happen in a city to ensure that that city has a thriving cultural, you know, engagement. And it's I think we underestimate children a lot, and when you are working closely with them and you hear their ideas and their imagination, see how they move their bodies, we've had mums come up to us and say, and dads, and come up to us and say, I never thought that my 8-month-old would sit through that, but they were absolutely engaged, besotted, you know, and it's really wonderful to sort of get that feedback. And I think that it's a real joy for the parents and the carers to experience that with their children as well, making those memories. And yeah, so as for funding, it's kind of I mean, we're independent, completely independent, and have no core funding, so you know, I think it's if you've got a project, as I mean, it was quite interesting to hear Hannah talking about the thing about it being the best of what you know, the best type of what it is. So so the funding's a whole kind of different kettle of fish anyway, isn't it? So yeah.
Well, and it is traditionally underfunded as well, but I think Gemma, it's really interesting because obviously you were nodding along about families doing art together, and obviously especially through lockdown that's been really clear. And I think, how have you found, obviously your Take Apart does that a lot, so why do you think maybe over lockdown families have actually drawn to doing this work more together? Is it because of being in lockdown? Because sometimes we used to run workshops and you get dropped kids off and the parents, obviously busy, would go off and do things, but now you sort of see a lot more cohesion between the two. Have you seen that through your work?
That's a really big question. I like it. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, the stuff you're historically talking about. So one thing that I've run a lot for Take Apart is we have a model called Crazy Glue that involves parents and children coming together in after school art groups. And the fundamental thing that has underpinned that every time is that it's for the parents and the children, because that's where the strength comes. I mean, a child can want to go to a show as much as they want, but if the family's not bought into that ethos, it tends to not work out, because they're the ones that have got the money to buy the ticket, essentially, you know, or go to the workshop or attend whatever it is. So for us, what we used to do with that model of working, which we're about to start again post-lockdown, is we'd have an hour with the parents without the children. So the children would still be in school and we'd have an hour with them, with the artists, so they had some creative time for themselves, and then the children would join and then they would take part with the parents after school. So there's that opportunity for the parent to be an individual and a creative in themselves. It comes back to what Helen's saying really about the power of play for me. So they had that time for themselves, and then they support their child in the activity as well, rather than it just being about facilitating their child taking part. And I think maybe boredom sounds awful. I think like lockdown, as a parent myself, like it drives you to kind of go, hang on, what is important here? What do I want to be doing when I'm stuck at home? And obviously homeschooling's been a big part of that for people, but I think finding creative ways to do that has been really vital. And I think creativity is so accessible and such a leveler that when people have had maybe a trickier time doing maths or English, like being able to go, actually, look, we're going to make a model today of this, or we're going to paint a picture of this, we're going to go out on a walk and see what colours we can find, like whatever level it is, it doesn't matter. It comes back to that thing of you're the best of your type, as everyone else has been saying, you know, whatever that activity, it can bring people together and get them involved in doing something. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my thinking with it.
No, I think that's really interesting. And it kind of comes back to this thing of being like, how, especially in lockdown, what I found very interesting is how you guys, obviously, there's an assumption I found where through lockdown I was going, oh, let's put stuff digital, it's fine, just plaster stuff in digital. But what's really interesting for all of you, and what Hannah was talking about for the strategy, is how those two are balanced. And even say, Jaqueline did the labyrinth, you did the walks, Gemma, and guys, you obviously afterwards started doing performances out and about. I'm going to start with, I think I'm going to start with Gemma and then I'll go around you guys to ask this about this. Why do you think there was a natural assumption, just because everyone was stuck at home, of being like, okay, the internet's a thing now, it seems Zoom suddenly seems to be crazy, never used it before, let's just do it because we need to do something? Or was there any hesitancy of picking up online?
I think, yeah, the answer is both, for sure. Like, I feel like as arts organisations, everyone, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but certainly for us to Take a Part, there was a feeling of like, oh God, we need to do something. We need to still be visible and be around. And not so much in an egotistical way, but like we were right in the heart of the community we were working in regularly, and we were a face, we were there. Like, and everyone here's got that connection with their audience and their community, you know, and to suddenly not be there for them, and particularly if they're vulnerable people or that's their one sort of creative outlet, that was like so vital and so important that I think everyone was like, oh my God, how do I connect? How do I do that? So we had that going on. And then at the same time for us, there was that whole thing that a lot of people experience of the digital poverty and people not being able to access online and that not even being an option for them. So it was kind of, what is that balance of connecting with those people? How can we do that safely? How can we offer stuff online, but how can we also make sure that if we're online, that people that we sort of deal with in person aren't lost? And so I think the answer for me, as well from a Take a Part perspective, is definitely a little bit of both. I don't know how other people feel about that.
Who wants to jump in?
I mean, for us, what we found was, so we put our workshops online. We had somebody's mum from one of the Phoenix groups say, try this Zoom, and we kind of went, oh yeah, okay, we'll give that a go. And so in the first lockdown, we had everybody joining. It was, it was this novelty, and they thoroughly enjoyed seeing themselves on the telly and all of that sort of thing as well. And we had a lot of feedback that, it was great that the children were still being able to engage, and we're still getting that. But what we found in this last lockdown was that the schools had also gone online. So there was a huge amount of Zoom fatigue. And, and we some children just couldn't bear it. They couldn't bear to be back online because they were there with school. They were doing Stiltskin, they were doing Beavers, it was so like everybody was online. So yeah, so it was quite an interesting time this second time around.
Helen and Vicky, how do you feel about that? Because obviously you went and did, obviously, like Jackie did, the weekly videos, nightly videos as well. How has that been? And then obviously moving back in, because I found at the Barbican, I agree with Jackie, the Zoom fatigue has really hit between this last lockdown. So I was wondering how you felt through the year about doing online work.
Yeah, it's been a real journey, because I think our bedtime stories that we started, we were about to go on tour with Two Little Kittens, our show for 2 to 4 year olds, and we had a lovely run at the Theatre Royal in Plymouth, and it was a week before, and it all just got cancelled. And trying to process that, I think I mean Vicky was probably the same, like the amount of work as a freelancer that I just lost overnight, like it was such a hard thing to process. And my gut response was like, I need to make something. I need to do something. And I just thought of all the families that, we were going to take work to. And so I just, spur of the moment, just propped my phone up on the coffee table and just told a story and kind of went really simple with it. And so, and the first story had, suddenly there was like 30 people watching, and I thought, oh, okay, there's people here. And then I messaged Vicky and I said, Vicky, do you want to do what I just did? I just told a story. Should we do this for real? And I think that was before the lockdown had properly been announced, because obviously theatres were closed a couple of days before, and it just took off from there really. And so we really relied on those Facebook Lives as a bit of a way of keeping us going, but also for those families. And because we got such a lovely response, and our families were quite quiet about it. It was like lots of emails and messages. It wasn't very kind of public and vocal, but we had so many people saying, like, messaging and saying, that's really helped me. My little one's settled tonight, and they haven't settled for months because of this and all the stress that's going on. And that's what kept us going. We kept going all the way through till July, every single day at 8 o'clock, and it was such a feat, because when we got to the end, I said to Vicky, how many stories have we told? But yeah, at that point we then ventured into Zoom. So we hadn't ventured into Zoom really until it was really last autumn. So it was that second lockdown. I think it was the second one. And that was a transition, wasn't it, Vicky?
Yeah, I think it's like a bit weird, because it's like, I feel like we're probably all stumbling our way through, aren't we? Kind of like not knowing what we're doing and hoping we find something. And when you strike gold, or you find something that like really works, or people are really engaging with it. And I think honestly, it's just been like just playing around with it. I don't think there's like a set structure that people need to follow, or there's not like a certain rule book that will help you. It's literally just trialing something, realizing, oh, that doesn't work, or oh yeah, that works, can we take it forward? What can we do with it? But like, I remember when Helen asked me to, like, she was like, can you prep a story? I was like, yeah, I can prep a story, thinking, oh, a one-off story's fine. I didn't realize it would turn into like 100 stories with me making my own puppets at home. I was like, I've never made a puppet in my life. Like, so as an artist, it's challenged all of us, I think, in like to picking up new skills that we either kind of like lost along our way as we kind of focused on other skills, or new skills that we like picked up. But with regards to like being online, I think the online world has always been seen as a platform for young people anyway, like as in social media, people watching videos, people like messaging and communicating with their friends and family. But I think like this time and this year and what we've all been through will really shift people's perspective of the power of digital work and being online, and how like how powerful it can be and how effective it can be as well. And I don't think it's something that we can just kind of like park up and forget about, and then our lives will carry on how they were, because there's some joy in online work and delivery and performances. There are some maybe not so glamorous moments or bits where you're like, I just want to be in person. But yeah, definitely some fruitful moments have come from this exploration.
It definitely feels like it's more of a less an afterthought and more of a tool that can be used effectively. But I think that's the thing at the moment, everyone's still trying to go, it's like, oh, does this work? And it sometimes falls a bit flat, but then you're also trying to feed it through. Hannah, I think the question of funding came up, and I thought this is quite an interesting thing, because obviously you're probably planning this 10-year strategy, and then obviously this massive crisis happens, freelancers do lose a lot of work, theatre institutions are on the brink. How was that trying to simultaneously manage this, and as a bridging organisation having these conversations whilst trying to plan for the future? And then there's an add-on question, which is, before the pandemic, was digital work, as in digital space, online space, such a big part of your plan moving forward, or was it just like a thing that sort of fell right at the bottom of your writing? Footnote.
Yeah, I think so. If I start with the second question first, I think because this has been and not to misuse the word, but co-created with hundreds of different people as a strategy, we have hopefully written what other organisations are doing and have said. So yes, I believe that digital, had this not been written in the pandemic, would not have featured in the way that it has. But I also think lots of other things wouldn't have featured, like the issue around inclusivity, the issue around digital poverty, the issue around green space, the connection between poverty, Black Lives Matter, and green space and the climate emergency. You know, I think all of those things would not, like, I firmly believe the strategy is better having been written in a pandemic, and when I was about 6 months into the process, I might not have said that, but I really feel it was a moment in time that allowed everyone to reflect. And I think some of what's really come out of what was discussed here tonight is what we look at organizations sort of using digital as a knee-jerk reaction and just putting something out, but actually what I saw was organizations going right back to the core purpose of their very being, which is we are here as a lifeline for people. And that's what I saw. And so I saw people and organizations saying, however we have to do this, however clunky and clumsy it is, we are a lifeline. And for some people, we are the only connection they have in community or in family as a network. And so it felt knee-jerk, but actually I think what was subconsciously happening was people were just returning to why they exist. And hopefully what then happens is people hold on to that and don't then just go back to doing what they were doing, but start to ask themselves, like, what should we lose during this process? And what should we really keep at our core? That might not be through the screen still, but I think through the screen, through reaching communities and families, has helped people to really hone in on what is important and why they exist, and that perhaps for some of us we got a little bit lost along the way. And I guess that does tie into the funding question, because I think a lot, as organisations grow and develop, we are all guilty of following funding sometimes, or accessing funding that has criteria that doesn't quite fit what we need, or we have to do things in a certain way that we wouldn't choose to necessarily do. So I do think it has enabled people to ask themselves of that question around, like, who do we want our funding partners to be? How do we want to be funded? What sort of flexibility do we want around the income that we generate? I think one thing I will say about the strategy, because it doesn't come with a massive funding pot, unfortunately. I wish it did. We've also tried to make it really clear that this is not it's not a sector strategy, it is a city strategy. So I think what's really important is the arts and cultural elements start to segue with the bigger city agendas. So if this is about poverty, educational attainment, if this is about literacy, if this is about health and well-being, like the things that we're doing in with children, working with families, working with young people, are actually addressing these major city agendas. And I think the key thing about a culture strategy is that we start to access funding that outside of the arts sector and is in these major societal challenges that we see. And we see it all the time. The Creative Learning Alliance did a really interesting report some years ago now, but we know that if people engage with something before the age of 10, they will return to it later in life. It's like ingrained, even if it's right back here. We know that people who engage in arts and culture are more likely to vote. They're more likely to volunteer. These are not just nice to have things. These are what will shape our future leaders. And so they are absolutely fundamental to societal and structural change that we need to see in a post-COVID world. And I'll get off my soapbox now, but yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah, that was amazing. I think what you mentioned there is really interesting, because obviously the digital meant, and Helen and Vicky, you mentioned this, and I think and Jaqueline and everyone did, that it means you can go wider. But it's really interesting how it's gone wide, but then also companies have done this lovely hyper-local work. And obviously, Jaqueline, you've done all the wonderful stuff outside the theatre. I'm just thinking, looking forward, how do you see, and I think all of you, I think there's a question for all of us, how do you see that kind of want to really placemake, serve our communities, keep to our core, whilst maybe also still trying to engage these new audiences that are in Canada? Not saying that you should be throwing birthday parties for people in Canada every day of the week, but it happens. So how do you see that kind of, especially you as the soapbox, how would you see trying to make that balance?
So for us, I think one thing that I've really, really enjoyed, and I have to say as well, what everybody's been saying about connecting with your community is that is the ultimate thing. But also as artists, when you're an artist, you don't just stop. And one thing that happened to me, especially during the lockdown, was that I nearly burst due to all my creativity was sort of like kind of inside, and I needed that outlet. So that the online was amazing for that. And I think we are so lucky to have our outdoor space. We're lucky for us to be able to use it, but we're also lucky to be able to offer it to other artists, and that's other theatre companies, comedy, all sorts of things. And so that's opened up a massive platform that we are able to offer. But also what I've quite enjoyed, so this lockdown, we've been going out to do site specific storytelling, and I've really enjoyed going out and finding places that link with a traditional tale or something like that, and then filming it. And what that creates is you've got that sort of like the storytelling is happening, but you're also engaging people who are walking past going, what's going on there? So, and it's opening up worlds in very different ways. And it's something that I probably would never have done, but it has opened up that creativity as well. So I think we would definitely keep that going for all the different reasons. I don't know if that answered your question, but
it does. It really does. It really provides that insight. Helen and Vicky, what how do you feel about that moving forward?
I think that theatre before didn't serve everyone, and I think that the digital space has certainly allowed us to reach people that would have never in their lives stepped into a theatre space or an art space or even a library space. And that's just happened because because we started on Facebook and they've accidentally come across us on a Facebook group. And certainly through the Tall Tales for Tiny Tots sessions that Vicky's been running, some of those families that have engaged with that work are, they even said it to us during our research for Plymouth Culture Investment Fund. They said, like, this is the first time we've ever done anything like this, and we would never before have come and seen a show. And Vicky, if you were performing a show, no matter where you were, I would get in the car and travel. And I think that that's just a lovely example of like the different thing that digital can provide that can support the live. And I loved what you were saying, Jaqueline, about videoing your performances so that can be watched for people that are shielding or people at home. I certainly wouldn't do a show now, I think, without doing that, and that's something I realised during the last lockdown last year, never videoed any performance that we've ever done. And now that would be like top priority. Can we live stream it? Can we make sure that there's another way of people accessing this? And I don't know if you wanted to speak more about that, Vicky, in terms of those tall tales groups.
Yeah, I think there's something really exciting about like realizing that this is an option that works and is like accessible, and like, I don't know, you look back at like your pre-COVID self and think, how narrow-minded were we to think that like everything has to be live or we have to put on a show every week or something, like, because it's possible there's other ways of engaging with families, and it's like possible to do that. And like, even if with Above Bounds, at least our dreams aren't to like continue these sessions forever, they'll evolve in whatever forms they like happen in. So the families have really enjoyed it being digital because they've managed to access it, or it's been really great for those who've been shielding, or we've reached people who wouldn't necessarily have even thought to try and like tread their toes in the water by traveling to Plymouth to give a session a go. But because we've like opened that world through an online platform, if these sessions or the future evolves into outdoor sessions or in-person workshops indoors, then like that's absolutely fine. I think it's like still important that we continue to respond to what the need is or what people would like. So if they want more online stuff, then we know that is an option, and if they want in-person stuff, that's also an option. Can we run the same session both online and in person and like blur the two together so it accommodates for both? Yeah, most probably that's an option too. So I think, yeah, it's opened our minds out to what the potential of theatre and culture and engagement and children's work can be in the future.
Gemma, have you got any other thoughts on that?
It's really interesting listening to everyone, and like obviously our realm's a little bit different because we're not theatre specific, but yeah, I think for Take Apart, I think it opened up just a different way of supporting artists and the team to kind of think creatively and think about how we could connect with our community, like when screens weren't an option and then when they became more of an option. I was just reflecting for myself, like we have in one community we have an arts action group, and they for a long time, Zoom just wasn't an option at all. It wasn't something they engaged with. And now, for the first time in a couple of months, we've had them coming onto Zoom, and they're actually now saying, oh, we can hear it better on Zoom. It's better than being at the back of a room. And so that shift is really interesting, and kind of same for our kind of team meetings and board meetings, the kind of possibilities of how we can bring people together. And I think as a sector, that Zoom has been really interesting for that, and other meeting platforms, like to be able to be in a space online, although it's been tricky, has been opened up other possibilities and brought different audiences. And as people have already kind of touched on, you know, people that are shielding or might not normally access things because they can't get out of their house, or they've got mobility issues or mental health issues, like being able to tap into those people in a different way. It's like, in a way, you kind of go, have we been that short-sighted? That's kind of crazy, and really important to kind of continue. So I think for us, kind of reflecting on our practice and how we work and be more accessible and utilise this platform where it's appropriate, and kind of support our artists and communities that we work with to do that. That's kind of probably the biggest bit of learning we're taking out of this bit of time, I suppose.
Mm. And Hannah, I'm going to ask you to answer this first, but this is my final question for everyone. But Hannah, I'm going to ask you this first, which is, how do we then ensure, because I think the lockdown has shown the importance of this work for families, and I think it's brought the art out from maybe when people were like, oh, it's a lesser thing, to actually at some points being equal standing. How do we then continue this work, so when in person it doesn't just suddenly become, oh, we'll put you on at Christmas and Easter, all school holidays? How do we then, as especially someone who's obviously working with other organisations which have multiple different agendas, how do we ensure that the children's and family work is always seen side by side with other programming and other outreach? How do you think about that? And that's the question for everyone, so we'll go around.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective, I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that happens, and so we're all in different forums where there is an opportunity to put that on the table, and I think just like so we'll be setting up a steering group that will look at the implementation plan for the culture plan, and I think we have a number of things that we would want to be lenses that were applied to everything. So climate emergency is obviously a lens that, you know, it's not just one project that sits over here, it's a lens that we would apply to everything. And I think something around cultural education, creative education, including, you know, young people and families, is a lens that we should apply to each and every project, initiative or conversation that comes to the table, and I think that's the way it starts to just become part of, and then it starts to feel strange when it's not at the table, and I think that's the shift we have a responsibility to make, but certainly the approach that I'll be taking from here.
Who wants to go next?
I think so one of the things that we are starting to do is to start to work with emerging artists and train them in working in children's theatre, and to actually so they get an experience. I'm not sure whether there's a great deal of offer at university and things like that of actually doing children's theatre as part of your course, and you know, for artists to kind of like engage in it, I don't know whether that might be the reason why they're not engaging, but so that's one of the things that we're doing, and with sort of like parents and sort of playing and things like that with their children, we call it myth busting. So it's actually saying to parents and adults, this is, you know, this is how you do it, and you've been a child, and so you can do it. So, you know, and it's just sort of like giving people permission and saying, actually, it's all right for you to play, you know, enjoy yourselves. So, yeah, that's our way forward.
Amazing. Who's next? Bov or Gemma or Vicky? I'll choose. I'll go Gemma. Go on, you're next.
That was like a little Mexican standoff. That was
funny.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We get the same thing at Take Apart when we say that we work with community. Like, community art is seen like with art with a little a, not a capital A, because it's like, oh, that's nice, that's over there, that's not contemporary, when actually it is absolutely contemporary and relevant and important and should always be there and not as a bolt-on. So I think for me, that's so important with work for children and young people and families. You know, it should be tied into every aspect of every project that's planned and programmed where it's relevant. So if there's a big big contemporary project of some sort, whatever it is, British art shows coming, you know, anything, it's coming to the city, we need to be asking the question, okay, what's in that bit of work for families, children, young people, and not as a little sideline over there with like 500 quid to do a couple of workshops tick, you know, what is the strand of programme and engagement that's going to happen there that excites people, young people, families, to come to that work that wouldn't normally come and see it, like whether it's theatre, whether it's visual art, dance, you know, whatever platform that is. That question needs to be asked every time. So often I've worked on many different projects, and for a whole load of reasons, not for any one thing, but it's seen as that fluffy kind of sideline, fringe, community, young people over there, like, oh yeah, that's nice over there, lovely, well done, pat you on the head kind of thing, and it's not good enough. So I think going forward, it's got to be asked every single time, what is the engagement for young people and families here? And it's important and it's as relevant, you know, and everyone should be wanting to get a ticket, and it's tough because all the families have bought them all. That's what I think.
Amazing. Helen and Vicky, you can now round it off after these amazing manifesto pledges. What is your extra manifesto pledge?
Shall I go first and give Helen the final word? I think it's like about just continuing these conversations, whether that's like amongst us as organisations and artists in the industry, or whether that's literally with families that we know, or families that we engage with, or engage with us, because I think sometimes people don't realise what they need, like they don't know until they know that the offer or the options out there. I think that's what it all comes down to, people saying we're not programming something because there's no need for it, or we're not going to do something because we don't see a market for it, but it's actually because no one's opened up that door or initiated those conversations to realise that there is. Because once you get talking to people, like, trust us, we know that there will be people who say, oh, I wish that would happen, that's a great idea, you should definitely do that, we'd support you. So it's there, and it's not necessarily hiding, it's just the fact that we're maybe not brave enough or bold enough, or people outside of who work within these organisations or focus on creating work for families and children don't necessarily think about having these conversations. But once people have their foot in the door, or get a little bit of a flavour of what they could be involved with, then that's just so exciting for them to know the world of possibilities they could enter. So like for me and like for us, I guess it's like continuing to hand out invitations in whatever form that is, whether that's online, via a video, via a workshop, via a performance, or literally a conversation with someone.
Yeah, totally. I think everything that all of you have said is like, so yeah, hitting the nail on the head. I think it's continuing to make the ask to the people that make the decisions, and continuing to put your hand up and go, hey, I'm here. And when you get offered a tiny amount of money, going, no, this is how much it costs. And then, you know, almost having to keep doing that. And it's quite tiring sometimes, but if we don't do that, then I think it will just be left off. And I think that everybody in this room is so so inspiring for advocating for this work and for kind of just doing it so well. And actually somebody said to me the other day, someone said, wow, all of the organisations that just do it really well independently are all the organisations that work with children and young people, because we just have to crack on and do it. Because quite often you knock on the doors of the big venues and they say, no, we're not going to programme that. So we go, okay, well, there's families there, so I'm going to do it there then. And then, you know, there's such high demand for this work. That, you know, Plymouth is a huge city. There should be, like Jaqueline said, there should be loads of people making work for children and young people. There's such a capacity for it. So I think it's keeping making the ask to the people making the decisions, and then, bringing up the next generation of children and young people, theatre makers, artists, inviting people into experiences, having interns from University of Plymouth. It's been great that we've just started doing that, and, you know, like letting people in on these processes and going, look how important this is. Mm-hmm. And actually, advocating for it outside of the city too, and saying, do you know what, there's some brilliant companies in Plymouth doing this work. Let's just open that door and show you.
And I think tonight has been a perfect example of that. So thank you all so much for being here. It's been a delight to hear all this stuff, and I hope that this agenda keeps on growing and growing and growing for the next couple of months as we come out of recovery and roadmaps and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you go onto the social medias and the Facebook groups and all the other stuff if you're connected online right now to see what these guys are doing. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you all for being here. If you can make a donation, that is greatly appreciated. It means we can help support do more of this stuff. Other than that, have a wonderful Thursday evening. we've got our one next week, which is going to be very exciting. That's going to be announced very, very, very shortly, and it's a bit hush hush, but it's incredible. So make sure you sign up. Okay, lovely to see you all. Hopefully see you again all very, very, very soon. See you. Have a good evening.